Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There it is, so you don't miss any of our football content this season. It has been, if I might say, fantastic. All right. Greatest ugly game in the history of the NFL. Washington beats the Bears 18-15 on a Hail Mary. Let me just start with this. Washington was the better team. They were the better coached team. I thought Chicago's offensive coaching at the end of the game was egregiously horrible late in the game. And let me just say, Caleb and his movement and his side arming stuff, you can see the Mahomes comps. He's running around. The O-line's getting overwhelmed. First of all, it was 9-0 at half. Chicago had 33 yards passing in the first half. I thought the game was over. But Chicago, their defense, kind of kept them in the game. And then Washington's offense stalled. But I got to, John, the 3rd and goal where the Bears did the fridge Perry, the following drive on a 3rd down to win the game, you thought. They did a draw, essentially putting in the hands. The whole game came down to one play. Thank God Keenan Allen, it was pass interference. I didn't get that. They made no attempt. It felt like the 3rd down was just setting up 4th down, and they had to have a touchdown to take a lead. So I just couldn't stand Chicago's offensive coaching. And I know it's a Hail Mary, but my take was Washington was the better team.
100%. Could not agree more. There was a stat that popped up, I think in the second half, that said he was 4 of 13 for 36 yards, that being Caleb. I thought, on this drive, can't be the game. And I had to double check. It was the game. Their offense was horrendous. Their defense was outstanding. I wrote down, even when it was 9-0, it felt, 28-0. Complete control. Jayden didn't just look like the best player in the game. He looked like one of the best players in the league. The thing I wrote down is, if you could pick these two coaching staffs, Eberflus, Waldron, and Dan Quinn, Cliff Kingsbury, the gap is like going from a star starting quarterback to some random backup. You're like, it's not even close. That's why when they take the lead, I'm like, listen, it's sports. Crazy things happen. But there haven't been many games this season where a team would have came away with a victory that was like, you didn't even come close. To call the play to a backup offensive lineman on, I was 1 year old with the refrigerator Perry plays, but he did it a lot, right? It was part of their arsenal. They weren't a good, obviously Walter Payton, but they weren't some dynamic offense. You drafted a receiver 9, you got Keenan Allen, you got DJ Moore. Your running backs are the reason you're in the game.
Yes.
If it wasn't for Swift's whatever huge run,
it
wouldn't even have been close. It was like that gave them life because they had none. They had none. To give them that play, even they ended up taking the lead with 20 seconds left. I think that has to go down as the most egregious play call of the season. Second would probably be that. Remember that fake play the Bills ran? I think against the Ravens when they were storming. But that was way worse. To get backup offensive lineman, it's not even, you can't even blame him. Belichick would say it's not on the player, it's on the coach. You can't put that guy in that position, right? It'd be like me, hey, John, make this video edit. I'd be like, I don't know. What do I do? That was crazy, Colin. It really was. They got lucky. The bounce or something didn't land where the guy did take it to the house. That could have been historic disaster on a given play.
And here's the other thing. I beat up on defensive coaches. The Bears were off a bye. The first half, no clever. Nothing. They weren't quick to the line. They weren't quick out of the huddle. It was just plodding. There wasn't any energy. And I understand off a bye. When we watch a McVay off a bye or some of these really well-coached teams.
Andy.
Or even Shanahan, you're like, Shanahan opens with the Jets. You're like, this is a mismatch. You can see the plays off a bye. It was a Sirianni. It's like you got nothing. You have no design plays. And it's one of those things where in the first half, Jayden Daniels was the best player on the field. I will say Caleb won't show up in the box score, but his ability, because Washington's pass rush, John, especially in the early portions, I think what happens sometimes, Washington's defensive line controlled the first half. These are 300-pound guys. I thought they wore down in the fourth, and it gave Caleb another second to maneuver around. They're big. I mean, these guys like Payne. You can't get 60 snaps out of these guys at the same energy level. And I thought Caleb bought time. I thought he made a couple of really, really high end throws in the fourth quarter. But John, that drive that gave them the lead on third down, this is not a field goal situation. You're going to score. They run another quarterback draw. And I thought, just after running a previous one, I thought, well, what are we doing here?
On first down, they ran a fade into the corner of the end zone. Like, what are you doing? Just slam the ball in. You're running the ball right down their throat.
So I just hated the Bears play calling, and not just because I had Washington as a side, but there are moments in the season where I feel bad for teams where like they outplay, they out scheme, and they end up on the wrong side of a game. I always kind of root for the team that looks like they put the effort in, they had a plan. I don't like luck wins, but they happen in football. I mean, shit happens. I mean, guys get hurt, you get bad breaks. But I will say
happens in all sports. Could have happened last night in the Yankee game if they would have came back in the ninth inning. It's like they didn't deserve to win that game. It's just that's why we watch.
But let's just say this right now. In terms of entire staff, Washington's got to have, I think it has a top 5 to 6 staff in the league. If you're counting both coordinators, I don't know. This pass defense was egregiously bad in the first month. Even that's gotten better. It was the worst pass defense for 3 weeks. So they're coaching the hell out of that thing.
Well, the two rosters, they spent a lot of money on their offensive line in Washington, and it's actually pretty solid. But the rest of the roster relative to the Bears, right? I mean, the Bears got better wide receivers. They definitely got a way better defense. I mean, they got a fantastic secondary. I mean, how good does Montez Sweat look? I mean, the guy looks like
Jesus,
Myles Garrett or something. A couple things. I think you give Caleb credit for competitive character because that was a game where he could have just folded like a cheap tent, and you could tell he was pretty down on the sideline. And then those last couple drives, the second to last one, he made a couple miraculous plays. Little Allen Iverson juke move of a defensive lineman to keep a play alive, throwing across his body. It looked like USC last year versus Arizona. Remember when he was just making some of these plays? You're like, holy shit, he did that tonight.
Yeah.
Another thing, I think if Chicago could have a do-over, I'm a huge Rome Odunze fan. He's going to be an excellent player. He would play for any team in the league. They had an opportunity with a top 10 pick, and their offensive line is not good.
Yeah.
And there were several offensive linemen on the board. It's, I get it. Receivers are sexy. You can find wide receivers all over the league. You can trade for them in the middle of the season. To not draft the Penn State guy, the Oregon State guy who can play 5 different positions.
Yeah.
So everyone, and I would imagine, the way the game ended, that's going to be the headline. But if it had just been a Washington just dominant victory, it would have been shitting on Caleb. And he did not play well. That offensive line was getting worked. And this was my concern. Like, I don't give you get credit because you've been an underachieving team. So you take care of teams like Carolina. That's the first step of like becoming good. You got to beat the bad teams, but it doesn't translate when you play better teams. It's why, like, you watch that first half, you're like, this team, they're going to let a lot of people down in that city because they're not going to be able to play with good teams. And it starts with their 5 offensive linemen. Washington is not. Joe Gibbs, I would imagine, had a pretty good defensive line. That's not what they're rolling out. I mean, this defensive line, I'm having to Google some of these guys. It's really more Dan Quinn, rah coaching these guys up. And they are getting beat like a drum on like every other play. So, yeah, Caleb, obviously you're kind of freaking out back there. You don't have any time and the balls start flying all over the map. But how many times did he step back 2 seconds later and there's like 3 guys coming at him? It's crazy.
Well, it's funny. I was talking to somebody this weekend. Harbaugh was either going to take Joe Alt or Thomas, the wide receiver in Jacksonville. Mike Thomas.
The 5th pick?
He apparently, this is what I was told. I mean, he loved Mike Thomas. And he's like, we got to protect our asset. We got to get Joe Alt. And people had Mike Thomas at like 15th, 20th. Apparently,
well, he's good. He had a touchdown a day. I mean, the guy makes plays every week.
No, he's just unbelievable. And Harbaugh was like, I think Harbaugh recruited him. Michigan couldn't get him.
Yeah.
And so, unlike the Bears, and the Chargers needed a receiver much more than the Bears did, and they went with Joe Alt because the take was, I got to protect Justin Herbert. So I like.
And remember, Harbaugh said that we view offensive linemen as weapons, the tip of the spear.
Yeah, and today was the classic ugly Chargers win where Yeah, it was just, boy, we'll talk about it later, but Jesus, Herbert's talented, freaking talented. Not working with much, talented.